My This is more on how to analyze the economy than on how to change it. A huge focus globally is we can't afford to do it if we haven't got the money. And I'm focusing on global warming in this particular presentation, but it's based on the way that economists, and I use the word pretend advisedly, they don't do research to say banks operate, and they say banks are what they call financial intermediaries. So they don't actually lend, they introduce a saver to a borrower, and the borrower does the borrowing from the saver. And they also pretend government works the same way. The government has to borrow from households in order to spend, and so on. And therefore, government surpluses save money, deficits are borrowing money. Now, that's completely wrong. When you do the accounting, and I'll show you that in a moment, you find banks create money. They don't borrow it. They don't act as intermediaries, and the deficit actually creates money as well, and surpluses destroy it, the opposite of what the mainstream thinks. So the textbook models that are taught to students, and they believe them to the day they die, unfortunately, most of them, use supply and demand diagrams. Now, banks don't lend using intersecting lines. They use double entry bookkeeping, and I've invented a software package called Ravel that lets you see that. And when I put the vision that economists have about banks being intermediaries, what happens is that banks don't actually lend, but households lend to firms, households lend to government, and what's going on is a shuffling of existing money from one account to another. Now, nothing actually happens on the asset side in this vision of lending. And the government is then required to sell bonds when it borrows, when it spends. This is a basic flowchart mathematics showing that government's required to issue bonds equal to the interest on existing bonds plus the deficit. That's the requirement people have. Now, if you simulate this model, the textbook model, you do get the crisis that people expect is going to happen if we don't eliminate the deficit. Debt ratios go through the roof, interest payments become utterly unsustainable. Clearly, long before you reach the levels that this chart finally shows, people would stop lending to the government, and that would be the breakdown that Musk in particular fears. But it's a myth. It's not the real world. And the Bank of England said so, echoing what I've been saying and other non-orthodox economists have been saying for a century. Banks are not intermediaries. They create money when they make a loan. So within a minute, I can change the model that I'm showing on screen now to one where the banks actually originate. And that one happens then, a whole lot of operations that are only on the liability and equity side of the table from the conventional textbook model turn up on both the assets and the liability side. And what that means is that operations create and destroy money. So if the government spends, it creates money. If it taxes, it destroys money. And the bond operations, what everybody worries about, bond operations actually don't access money or change the amount of money. They change the assets that back the money that's been created by the government in the first place. There's no borrowing involved in selling bonds. All of this sounds totally counterintuitive, and it is. It's about the same thing as stopping to believe that the Earth is the center of the universe and realize that we orbit around the sun. It's literally that level of change in the understanding of economics. Now, when I simulate the model with the real world with absolutely no changes to the rest of the model, then I find multiple differences. GDP grows because the money supply is growing, turning over more rapidly, and the debt ratio stabilizes because, as well as creating more debt, you're creating more money, which creates more economic activity. The whole thing reaches a stable position in the long term. Now, this matters to me now dramatically because when climate change hits, and I don't say if anymore, it's when, we will need to attack the damage we've done in the same way we attacked the Nazis in World War II, and that was by government money creation. Unfortunately, we have a bunch of morons in charge of government policy who don't realise the government creates money, so their inability to understand what happens in the current system means they're going to hamper us when we start trying to work on the real system. We have to get rid of them, frankly. And I'm trying, if people realised how bad their work was, they would be caught up in their own Nuremberg trial for ecocide, which is what they're actually causing. So
30
I
seconds.
cover a lot. If you want to find more background, there's never enough time in these 5 minutes. Any of those links will take you to my work on how to actually properly understand the economy. And the bottom one is to get a copy of my software so you can see it for yourself.